欢迎回到《狮城有约》。李显龙总理今天宣布改组内阁，黄循财升任副总理，同时继续出任财政部长。
此外3名政务部长和政务次长在这次的内阁改组中获得擢升，而5名政治职务者的部门将有所调动。新内阁人事调动将从下一个星期一生效。
政治分析师怎么看待这一次的内阁改组？新内阁人事调动的幅度又是否在预料之中呢？
我们访问了新加坡管理大学法律系的陈庆文副教授，听一听他怎么说。
It is very much keeping with a cabinet reshuffle that is only for a government that's only 2 years in its term of office. The next general election must be held latest by November 2025. So I think this is not really a time, for significant changes. We are likely to see more significant changes, in the second half of this government's term. But of course, there was a significant change. I mean, you have Finance Minister Lawrence Wong being promoted to Deputy Prime Minister, right? So we will now have 2 Deputy Prime Ministers in Mr. Heng Swee Keat as well as in Mr. Lawrence Wong. PM also announced, that Mr. Wong will be the acting Prime Minister, in PM Lee's absence. So this is very much in keeping the expectation of, the 4G leader, right, who is now Mr. Wong and who is slated to take over, from Mr. Lee Hsien Loong. So in many respects, it is keeping with expectations, and I think it also demonstrates that, change in terms of leadership challenges and all should generally be taken on an incremental approach. That's how you build deep expertise. That's how you broaden, meaningful experience, for the younger ministers.
财政部长黄循财受委为副总理是意料中的事，但对于副总理王瑞杰继续出任副总理一职和内阁正部长当中没有任何的职务调动，陈教授又怎么看呢？
I think we should look at that as PM wanting to have, the full suite of his cabinet ministers, right? So there were no retirements as well. So we now have, the same combination of, 3rd generation and 4th generation leaders. And I think it demonstrates, right, the PM's preference and recognition that having deep expertise, long experience, steady hands, so we are talking about senior ministers, Teo Chee Hean, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, as well as the other 3G ministers, such as Dr. Ng Eng Hen and Mr. K. Shanmugam. These are very experienced, capable leaders, and I think as we are still in the midst of a pandemic, we are already charting our recovery. I think PM recognizes that it is important, to have, the full array of abilities and talent and competencies, in his cabinet, right? I think it's certainly a correct move, right? The idea, to ensure that you have that combination of experience, as well as new energy and new ideas.
那这一次的内阁调动整体来说幅度不大，但一些较年轻的政治职务者在新内阁改组中被提拔，升任更高阶级的政治职务。
从最新的内阁调动来看呢，我们是否已经可以看出新的领导班子开始形成了呢？又或者说，新一代的领导班子的形成进度较为缓慢？
I think when you look at cabinet reshuffles, there is always the intention, to blood new talent, right? So, but this time there were no new political office holders. But the other aspect of cabinet reshuffles, right, which is to expose younger ministers to new assignments, new challenges, that has continued. I think in many ways, we will probably see, future cabinet changes, to not be too comprehensive, simply because I think we now have, the 4G team very much in place. And it's now a question of, enabling them to see and lead, from a whole of government perspective. I think that there is a need now, for example, for the 4G leaders, to develop, deep expertise, in certain areas, whether that relates to security, whether that relates to economic portfolios, or whether that relates to social portfolios. So I think now, with the 4G leader succession, settled, it is now time for, PM Lee as well as Mr. Wong, to ensure, that the 4G team, continues to be able, to take on new assignments and to be able to win the trust and confidence of Singaporeans.
在这一次内阁改组中获得擢升的较年轻内阁成员当中呢，陈杰豪就是其中一位，他将升任国家发展部和通讯及新闻部高级政务部长。
那政治分析师如何看待他担任政治职务以来的表现，以及他这次的升迁呢？
I suppose, for Mr. Tan Kiat Hao, being the only notable promotion, right, from Minister of State to Senior Minister of State, it does point to PM's recognition, that Mr. Tan has done well, in his current portfolio since he was elected in 2020. He is also in charge of the government feedback unit, REACH. And I think it does suggest that, PM believes, that Mr. Tan can take on bigger challenges, and also a signal, of his potential. And I think we will see, the younger leaders, those in their early 40s, to feature prominently, in future cabinet changes. So we now have a situation where, the 4G core, right, essentially the ministers, are more or less settled. And I think we can see the focus now, shifting, towards the younger leaders, those, some of whom, could perhaps be regarded as the fifth generation leaders. And so, this is really a time, for them to be exposed, to a variety of challenges, and for them, to be able to develop, their expertise and experience in the many different areas of government.
陈国民将卸下现有的内政部兼永续发展与环境部政务部长职务，改任总理公署政务部长，并将加入全国职工总会，接替徐方达成为职总副秘书长。
而徐方达呢，则将离开全国职工总会，出任财政部兼交通部高级政务部长。陈庆文副教授又怎么看待他们的职务调动呢？
I think in many ways, it reflects the close relationship between the People's Action Party as well as the National Trades Union Congress, NTUC. And it seems to be the case, that PM has a preference, to have as many of his political office holders, to have exposure, to the trade union movement. So it is perhaps not surprising if we see regular changes of Deputy Secretary General. So Mr. Chee Hong Tat, has been there for slightly more than a year, and he will now be replaced by, Mr. Desmond Tan. And I think the idea is certainly to have as many political office holders, to have exposure, to the trade union movement, to recognize, the importance of strong relationships, among the tripartite partners, employers, the labor movement, and the government, and for the union leaders as well as the younger leaders, to have the opportunity to work with each other, to understand, the issues that relate, to workers in Singapore, because this is going to form. This has always been and will continue to form a critical part, of our economic development.
另外呢，徐宝坤医生将卸下卫生部高级政务部长一职呢，转而出任永续发展与环境部高级政务部长。
徐宝坤医生加入卫生部1年就被调动到永续发展与环境部，分析师如何看待背后的原因？而 而徐宝奎医生加入永续发展与环境部之后，又可能负责哪些事务呢？
I think, for MSE to now have, two senior ministers of state, again reflects the growing importance of issues relating to that ministry, right? So whether we're talking about the environment, whether we're talking about water resources, whether we're talking about sustainability and climate change. So I would expect, Dr. Cole, to perhaps be given the task of looking at climate change issues, right? Engaging particularly with younger people. Climate change is certainly not an issue that only affects younger people. It affects older Singaporeans as well, right? I mean, no older generation Singaporean would want to think, that Singapore will not be able to deal with climate change issues. So I see the Prime Minister, putting another office holder, in MSE, as reflecting, the need, for more leadership, for more resources, to be deployed to that ministry, because I think it is a very important issue.
另外，再来关注孙雪玲将卸下教育部职务，同时出任社会及家庭发展部兼内政部政务部长，而拉哈尤马赞则将升任卫生部兼律政部高级政务次长。
分析师怎么看待内阁女成员在这轮内阁改组中的职务调动和擢升呢？
Ms. Sun Xueling as well as Madam Rahayu Maznam, together with Ms. Low Yan Ling, successfully chaired the conversations on Singapore women's development. And I believe that the very successful co-chairmanship of that very important process of national dialogue and conversation has given confidence, to PM, to promote Ms. Rahayu, to put her to a new ministry, the Ministry of Law. She's also a lawyer by training, and to again, put Ms. Sun Xueling, to another portfolio. So, in her time in government, she's been in several ministries, right? Whether that is that's Home Affairs, Education, and going forward, she will be exposed to other areas of government.
好，我们谢谢陈教授的分享。
好，在下段节目当中来看看网红这一词呢，早就不再只是年轻人的专利了，乐力人士也可以掀起一股新的风潮。
稍后的玩转新潮呢，带你去认识本地一位年过70的年长者，在短视频平台走红，更吸引了超过25万名粉丝的关注。